Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we give you the full story behind the headlines. Today we're digging into a really significant event, that phone call between President Trump and President Xi Jinping.
Yeah, lots of analysts are calling it a rare thaw, which tells you something about the state of U.S.-China relations lately. It's been pretty frosty.
Definitely frosty.
Yeah.
A deep freeze, you might say.
So our mission today, for you listening, is to really get into the weeds of what they actually discussed. It's a complex agenda, right? We're talking tech, specifically TikTok, trade, tariffs, security issues like fentanyl, even the Russia-Ukraine war came up. We want to figure out what progress, if any, was really made.
Exactly. What did Trump claim as a win? And maybe more importantly, what are the hidden sticking points as they head towards this summit they've agreed to?
Right. Because the big outcome, pulled straight from our sources, is this agreement for them to meet face-to-face.
Yeah, in Gyeongju, South Korea. Starts October 31st, part of the APEC summit.
It's the first time they'll be in the same room since things really ramped up again, tension-wise. It really sets the stage, doesn't it, for the relationship moving forward.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Starting with, well, it seems like an unlikely starting point. TikTok.
Right, a video app. Owned by China's ByteDance. How does that become central to these high-level, high-stakes discussions?
Well, the context here is that intense legal pressure in the U.S. There's a law, basically, that says TikTok faces a ban, a shutdown, by January 2025.
Unless
Its American operations get spun off, sold to U.S. ownership. And Trump, after this call, he described the talk as very good. He even said China gave, and this is his phrase, appreciated approval to some kind of framework deal.
Okay, appreciated approval. That sounds positive. But the substance of this supposed framework deal, as the sources describe it, well, it immediately raises some eyebrows, particularly if you're focused on national security.
How so?
The idea seems to be that, yes, the U.S. assets, the company structure, servers, maybe user data, that stuff would transfer to American owners.
Okay, sounds straightforward enough.
But, and this is the really big, but the platform would apparently keep relying on ByteDance's core algorithm.
Ah, the algorithm. The secret sauce.
Exactly. The brains of the operation, if you like. It's sort of like, imagine buying a store. You own the building, the shelves.
Right.
But your biggest competitor still controls what products go on the shelves, how they're priced, and crucially, where the security cameras are pointed.
That's a great analogy. So U.S. lawmakers aren't worried about who owns the furniture.
Not really. They're worried about potential manipulation. It boils down to two things, really.
Which are?
Data security. Could ByteDance still access data on, 170 million U.S. users?
Yeah.
And maybe even more critical, content control.
Meaning they could push certain narratives
Right.
or suppress others.
Precisely. Turning it into a subtle, or maybe not so subtle, political messaging tool. That's the fear.
And what did Beijing say? Did their official statement mention TikTok?
Not a word. Zero specific mention in the statement from Xinhua, their official news agency.
Really? So just silence on that.
Well, not silence, but very careful language. They just emphasize that the government, quote, respects the will of firms and welcomes companies to conduct business negotiations on the basis of market rules.
This is like classic diplomatic ambiguity.
It is. It lets Xi look cooperative on the world stage, respecting market rules, but avoids any concrete promise on TikTok specifically. If the deal falls apart later, they can say they never actually agreed to that.
It's strategic spin. But there was that one really memorable detail, wasn't there, from Trump himself about TikTok?
Oh, yeah. Very direct. He reportedly said, quote, I like TikTok. It helped get me elected.
Wow. I mean, it's pretty rare to hear a president state the transactional political calculation so openly, especially on something framed as a national security issue.
It really highlights that tightrope they're walking, doesn't it? Balancing economic interests, political utility, and genuine security concern.
Okay, so if TikTok is the sort of digital flashpoint, let's connect that to the bigger economic picture. Because beneath the app drama, the core tensions are still about trade and tech restrictions, right?
Absolutely. Even if they find some temporary fix for TikTok, the fundamental relationship is still defined by these deep economic conflicts. We're talking trade wars, basically.
And Trump, since coming back into office in January, he hasn't held back on tariffs. The sources say duties are at levels not seen in nearly a century.
That's significant. This isn't just tinkering, it's major economic pressure. And China, predictably, hit back.
How did they retaliate?
They targeted things critical to the U.S. Certain agricultural imports, yes, but also strategically rare earth exports, things we need.
And even though there were those mini deals over the summer that paused some tariff hikes, the overall strain is still there for both economies, isn't it?
No doubt. You just have to look at the numbers. The U.S. still has its biggest bilateral trade deficit with China. We buy way more from them than they buy from us.
And China's growth?
It's slowed down. Weaker export demand globally is hitting them. So it's causing pain on both sides, this economic conflict. But neither seems ready to really back down.
And this plays out in very specific, critical sectors. It's not just random tariffs. Washington's been targeting China's access to really advanced tech.
That's right. Things like high-end semiconductors.
The really sophisticated chips.
Exactly. The ones you need for next-gen AI, for supercomputers, for advanced military gear, also certain jet engines, specialized chemicals. It's about trying to maintain a technological edge.
It sounds like a deliberate strategy to sort of choke off their progress in key areas.
That's arguably the goal, to maintain U.S. strategic superiority. And on the flip side, Washington is demanding China buy more U.S. goods, soybeans, Boeing aircraft, things like that.
And China's countermove. You mentioned rare earths.
Yeah, squeezing U.S. access to rare earth magnets. These aren't your fridge magnets.
No.
These are crucial components. They're in electric vehicles, wind turbines, batteries, and, importantly, sophisticated military hardware. China dominates that supply chain, and they're using that leverage.
Okay, so that's the tech and trade battlefield. Let's shift gears slightly to a major security crisis, fentanyl.
A deeply concerning issue, and one where Washington has been pointing the finger directly at Beijing.
The accusation is that China isn't doing enough to stop the export of precursor chemicals, the raw ingredients, basically, that fuel the opioid epidemic here in the U.S. Trump called it a major national security concern.
And rightly so. The death toll is staggering. In the call, Trump apparently characterized the dialogue on this as constructive. That suggests she was at least willing to engage, perhaps more seriously than before.
But constructive dialogue is one thing. Are we seeing any actual action? Any signs of real commitment from Beijing?
Well, analysts are watching that very closely. Talk is cheap, especially on an issue this critical. There was one small gesture mentioned in the sources, though.
What was that?
Chinese authorities finally allowed a U.S. banker, Shenyu Mao from Wells Fargo, to leave China. He'd been stuck there for months under travel restrictions.
Okay, so they let one banker go home.
Washington viewed it as a small but maybe notable concession, a sign of goodwill, perhaps.
I mean, let's be a bit skeptical here, though. One banker allowed to leave compared to the scale of the fentanyl crisis.
Yeah.
Does that really balance out? Is that leverage or just accepting a minimal gesture?
That's exactly the critical question, isn't it? Is it a tactical move by Beijing to ease immediate pressure, or does it signal a genuine shift? Most analysts would probably lean towards tactical move.
Right. It doesn't seem like a fundamental change on the precursor chemical issue itself.
Not based on that single action, no. And this sort of tactical maneuvering brings us to the bigger geopolitical picture, specifically the Russia-Ukraine war, which sources say was discussed in the call.
Trump brought it up forcefully.
That's the indication. Yeah. The core U.S. concern, obviously, is Beijing's support for Moscow.
Not direct military aid necessarily, but
vast quantities of dual-use technologies, things that have civilian and military applications, advanced machine tools, microelectronics, drone components, optics, stuff that helps Russia keep its war machine running.
Even while China publicly claims neutrality.
Exactly. They maintain that neutral stance, talk about respecting territorial integrity.
So what was Xi's response during the call, according to the sources?
Pretty much consistent with their public posture. Likely non-committal, he probably reiterated the line about respecting sovereignty, but also stressed that their trade with Russia is just, normal commercial activity.
So trying to have both ways.
Yeah.
Appear neutral while still propping up Russia.
That seems to be the strategy. Prevent a Russian collapse, which Beijing sees as bad for their own long-term competition with the U.S. and NATO, but do it without triggering major secondary sanctions on themselves. It's a balancing act.
Which leads to the big question, I think, as we look at this whole call. What's the real intent here, especially from Xi's side? We're hearing reports of constructive dialogue, a thaw. But is this genuine progress? Or is it more about optics? Just managing appearances for a global audience? What are the analysts saying?
There's definitely a healthy dose of skepticism among analysts, someone like Craig Singleton over at FDD.
Foundation for Defensive Democracies.
Right. He's basically cautioning against reading too much into the positive spin. The view is that Beijing might be much more interested in looking cooperative than in actually making tough structural changes.
So, managing perceptions.
Singleton put it quite bluntly. He said, Beijing is banking on optics and time, while Washington is chasing a TikTok headline and a summit.
Ouch. That's pretty stark.
His assessment is that China is actually very happy with the current dynamic. They get to look reasonable, keep talking, while facing arguably minimal real consequences for their actions on trade imbalances, tech practices, or even support for Russia.
Strategic patience from Beijing, maybe? Playing the long game?
That certainly fits their pattern. But regardless of the deeper motives, the summit is happening. End of October, Gyeongju.
The first face-to-face since tensions really flared up again.
And you can bet both leaders will want to project a sense of pragmatism, of stability. The global markets watch these meetings very closely.
But we absolutely cannot forget those huge underlying disputes that haven't gone away, even with this call. The sources are clear. They were mentioned, but they're far from resolved.
Absolutely. The future of Taiwan, the constant friction in the South China Sea, the details around the Russia-Ukraine war, these are massive potential fracture points just looming in the background.
And there's also that agreement for reciprocal visits next year, right?
Yes, that's another key outcome. Trump is supposed to go to China early next year, and Xi is expected to visit the U.S. later.
Which underlines that, despite everything, managing this relationship, even if it's just managing the risk, is still a top priority for both Washington and Beijing. They have to keep talking.
It seems so. Too much is at stake not to.
Okay, so let's try to wrap this up. After digging through all this, what's the big picture takeaway for you listening at home?
Well, we've seen how something like TikTok, maybe unexpectedly, became this lever part political, part economic that seemed to open the door for this renewed dialogue.
Yeah, the unlikely bridge.
But the fundamental conflicts, the deep disagreements over tariffs, over who controls critical technologies like semiconductors and rare earths, the really serious security concerns like fentanyl and China's role regarding Russia, those haven't magically disappeared. They're all still very much on the table.
So the core takeaway might be,
Yeah.
what? That the world's two superpowers are still locked in this intense competition.
Deep structural competition, yes. But at least for now, they seem to be choosing conversation or maybe managed de-escalation over immediate confrontation.
The call, the summit agreement. It shows that maybe shared economic interests or just a shared desire to avoid things spiraling completely out of control is currently outweighing the urge to push harder.
For now, anyway, the willingness to talk is there.
Okay, and as we finish, here's that final provocative thought for you to chew on. The sources kept mentioning those big unresolved issues. Taiwan, the South China Sea. If an app, TikTok, was the sort of diplomatic lubricant that led to this Gyeongju summit, what happens next year during those reciprocal visits?
Right.
What major geopolitical flashpoint, maybe Taiwan itself, becomes the unavoidable centerpiece? And could that be the issue that fractures this fragile truce? Something to definitely keep an eye on in the headlines.
Absolutely. The underlying tensions haven't gone away.
We'll certainly be watching. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive. Until next time.